Ecopsychology by Vladimir Antonov. This book is written in a simple and easy-to-understand language by scientist-biologist Dr. Vladimir Antonov. It covers the essential issues: what is God? The place of the human being in the evolution of the universal consciousness. Principles of forming and correction of destiny. Ways of attaining health and happiness. Most effective methods of psychic self-regulation. About spiritual development and cognition of God. The book includes also texts of several lectures by Dr. Antonov. These lectures may repeat the main ideas of the book. In other words, it will help the readers to comprehend the material more fully. The book is intended for all kinds of readers. Ecology of human beings in multidimensional space. Ecology and ecopsychology. Ecology is a science that studies relationships between living organisms and the environment they live in. Its branches focus on studying specific kinds of these organisms and are called respectively. For example, ecology of European beavers or ecology of sturgeons, etc. The object can be researched in terms of its habitat, places, and conditions of reproduction, mating patterns, and other kinds of interaction with representative of the same species, competitors, and enemies, predators, parasites, etc., or just neighbors. Human beings can also be an object of such research. It is being studied mostly in its working environment, sea, coal mines, spaceflight, etc. A separate branch of ecology of human beings is protection of the environment. In many countries, there are special ecological services as well as voluntary environmentalist organizations like Greenpeace. Environmentalists struggle against pollution of water resources, air, and soil, as well as for preservation of natural forests and fauna. They protest against nuclear weapons testing, fight for banning of chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons, and anti-personnel mines that cripple civilians and animals. They also call for banning of the usage of traps in fur trade, which cause incredible suffering to animals. The environmentalist movement deserves highest praise and every possible kind of support. The applied ecological studies of professional activities of man are also very important. But in this book, we will try to show that this is not all that ecology of human beings can study. Man is not only a body, but also and primarily a consciousness or soul. And man lives not only in close contact with air, water, soil, animals, plants, viruses, and bacteria. We also interact with non-embodied individual consciousnesses, spirits of people and animals, and, which is the most important of all, with God. This is the subject of the science ecopsychology as the most important branch of ecology. In reality, we live in a multidimensional environment, and the material world that we can perceive with our senses is just a small portion of it. Other layers, eons or lokas, of the multidimensional universe usually remain completely out of our perception, although they are filled with life that can see us and which influences us. For the completeness of ecological perception, which allows us to live our lives on the earth in the best way, we have to include in our worldview Him who is the most important one in the universe, God. For this purpose, we need to have, first of all, the knowledge about God, about the evolution of the universal consciousness, and about our role in this process. And we have to realize that ethics is that field of philosophical knowledge which allows man to live in ecological harmony with God and with the entire environment. What is man? In order to be really comprehensive, the whole system of knowledge about human beings should be based on the premise that man is not a body, but a consciousness, i.e., living energy, capable of self-awareness and possessing mind and memory. The body is merely a transient habitat for the consciousness, and throughout the personal evolution, every individual moves in and out of those habitats, dropping off old bodies and entering new ones. Materialists and followers of primitive religious sects do not believe this. On the other hand, God has been telling us about this through Thoth the Atlantean, Hermes Trismegistus, Lao Tse, Krishna, Buddha, Jesus Christ, Babaji from Haidakan, Sathya Sai Baba, and numerous other divine teachers and prophets. One may or may not believe in this. A small and weak consciousness, which associates itself with a contaminated and sick body, is generally unable to switch from blind faith, or lack of it, to knowledge. But one can experience this if one starts to develop oneself as a consciousness. This process is also known as walking the spiritual path. It is this process of development of the consciousness, both qualitatively and quantitatively, that constitutes the meaning of man's life, as well as lives of all living beings. But what is this all for, one may ask? The answer is, for the sake of merging with God, and thus enriching Him with oneself. Everything material in the universe, including our planet and everything on it, exists only for that purpose, to ensure the possibility of development of individual consciousnesses on material mediums. Evolution of any individual soul starts as follows. On the lattices of growing minerals, the processes of formation and growth of the first rudiments of initially diffusive energy, called Protopurusha in Sanskrit, begin. Subsequently, the tiny amount of energy formed in this way gets embodied into bodies of plants where it continues to grow. Then it moves into animal bodies and finally into human ones. The soul grows from one incarnation to another. One can observe some primitive emotional reactions and motor reflexes even in vegetable forms of life. Evolutionary advanced animals have a wide variety of emotions and feelings, and, in some instances, even possess a well-developed intellect. At the human stage of evolution, among other things, we have to get an understanding of the fundamental principles of consciousness development, and to take an active part in this process. Unfortunately, the majority of people do not do this, mainly due to philosophical and religious ignorance that currently prevails on our planet. Multidimensionality of space. In reality, the universal space is multidimensional. Just like sunlight and water coexist within the same volume, sunlight moving freely through the water with little or no interaction with it, just like radio waves of different frequencies, are present deep in the space in and out of our bodies. Even so, multiple worlds exist everywhere deep inside. Multidimensional space, in and out of all material objects, be they in solid, liquid, or gaseous states. Those worlds are abodes of spirits and God. The scale of multidimensionality is a special scale of energy states, which represent fundamentally different ranges. When studying this scale, the vector of one's attention should be directed not upward or downward, or in any conventional direction, but inward. Layers of the multidimensional space, eons in Greek or lokas in Sanskrit, are ranged by their coarseness subtlety. The plane of the subtlest energies is God in the aspect of the Creator. He is perceived as infinite and purest light, which is similar to tender and warm sunlight at dawn time. He is formless. All forms vanish on this plane. His name sounds differently in different languages. God the Father, Jehovah, Allah, Ishvara, primordial consciousness, Tao, etc. He is the God of Jewish prophets and of Jesus Christ, of Muhammad, and of all the faithful ones of China, India, and other places where people have a correct concept of him. Only those deluded by ignorance or intellectually primitive people can think that different names mean existence of different gods. That first primordial plane, called the abode of the Creator, is where the construction project of creating every new islet in the multidimensional creation is realized from. Proto-matter, proto-prakriti, utakasha in Sanskrit, is used as construction material for creating solid matter. This layer, if one enters it with the consciousness, is perceived from inside as infinite universal space filled with tenderness and peace, though lacking intensive radiance. It could be compared to a warm and tender starlit southern night. An extremely important thing to know is that the Creator and the eons of Akasha are somewhat on the other side of a mirror in relation to the creation, in the transmirror realm, so to say. This universal mirror is somewhat like a regular mirror. It has its dark and light sides. When on a planet there appear conditions suitable for organic life to exist, small lumps of protopurusha start to incarnate into material carriers. This constitutes the beginning of concurrent evolution of organic bodies and souls that get embodied into them. The evolution of organic bodies has been thoroughly studied by biologists. The only missing link here that one needs to realize is the guidance of God over the whole process. Our task as human beings here on the earth consists in, having grown as souls, as consciousnesses, going all the way from the creation back to the Creator, refining ourselves as consciousnesses, in order to merge into Him, to enrich Him. This is what the intention of God was when He created our planet. And this is the purpose of our lives. It is important for us to realize that we are not capable of existing on our own. Therefore, we have neither right nor grounds to feel egocentric and to consider ourselves to be more important than other living beings. Since the only being whose existence does not need to be supported is the Creator, and He launched all of His creation not for our sake, but for the sake of His evolution. This sheds light on what determines our destinies. If we move in the right direction, then everything goes fine in our daily lives. If not, He brings our attention to this by means of our pain and of what we call tough luck. In the course of an enormous period of time, in Earth's measures, billions of human bodies and even a greater number of souls of different ages and levels of development emerged on our planet. Those of them who attain perfection merge with the Creator and do not get embodied anymore. Sometimes they do, but only as avatars. The rest of the souls have to return to embodied states again and again, until the time period allocated for existence of this particular islet of matter is elapsed. When this happens, all matter, along with souls that have not attained perfection, get disintegrated down to the Akasha state to serve as the construction material for creating new worlds of matter and various forms of life in them. On the opposite, from God's end of the coarseness subtlety scale, there is a diabolic eon, a world of coarse, black-colored energies, which induces eerie emotional states, and is perceived as something sticky like petroleum. How souls get to this plane will be discussed later. There is also the abode of the virtuous, paradise. After the death of the body, the soul ends up in the eon it deserved while living in the embodied state. But we have to reach for the highest and the subtlest eons. For us, raised in an atheistic environment and surrounded by religious ignorance, it may be hard, though absolutely necessary, to comprehend that God the Father does not live only up in the sky, on a high mountain, on another planet, and so on. He is everywhere in the universe, in the depth beneath our bodies, beneath the entire material world, the entire creation. And the stairway to God does not invite upward, but depthward. The levels of refinement of the consciousness are its footsteps, and this stairway begins in our spiritual hearts. Everything said above is the result of a thorough research and personal experience of the author of this book, and is neither a compilation of other texts nor a reproduction of somebody else's words. And everyone has to make efforts and walk this path to the end. But it is important to know that in order to advance, one should go up one step at a time, from one footstep to another, without jumping over flights of stairs. The abode of the Creator exists everywhere, beneath every material molecule. Jesus said that the distance to it is thinner than a sheet of the finest paper. God the Father is not in the physical sky. He is everywhere inside and around our bodies, underlying every bit of them. His abode is extremely close to us, but one cannot get into it just like that. In order to enter it, one has to receive a blessing from him, but only those who have properly developed themselves in love, wisdom, and power can receive this blessing. The path to the abode of the Creator is the path of gradual refinement of oneself as a consciousness. As the first step, it is necessary, as Apostle Paul put it, to avert from what is evil and cling to what is good, which implies leaving companies of drunkards, cruel and rude people, learning to see the beauty of living nature and of the true art, making companions on the spiritual path one's friends. First steps in realizing the potential of the spiritual heart become the next stage of acquiring steadfastness in living in subtle states. Then one can proceed with cleansing the chakras and major meridians of the body, including Chitrini, Brahmanadi. Successful completion of this process will allow one to find oneself right in the eon of the Holy Spirit upon exiting from the body through Chitrini. And the pranava meditation will enable one to merge with the Holy Spirit for the first time. In this manner, gradually moving deeper and deeper inside the multidimensional universe, stopping for a while to rest and to settle in the newly discovered states, we can reach the abode of the Creator, which with time becomes our home. The described above is the true way towards attaining God, as opposed to what sometimes is mistaken for it, i.e., crusades against infidels, or declaring anathema on some particular otherwise minded persons or sects, or even on whole nations. Those are ways to the development of devilish qualities, the way to hell. God. So, we have discussed where one should seek God. Not somewhere up in the sky, but in the depth of the multidimensional universe. And one has to begin searching for him, not far in the cosmos, but in one's own chest, in one's own spiritual heart, which begins its growth in the Anahata chakra, which is called also the middle dantian. We have also agreed that the word God, with capital G, in the first place must be interpreted as primordial consciousness that dwells in the deepest and subtlest primary plane of the multidimensional universe. This primordial consciousness is one for the whole universe, and therefore for all living beings, including people who live on our planet. And the fact that the word God sounds differently in different languages does not mean that there are many gods, or that various nations that inhabit the earth have their own god. The words sun and earth, too, sound quite differently when spoken by people of different nationalities in their native languages. But it does not mean that people of each country have their own sun, or that each nation lives on its own planet. But we have not discussed yet all the aspects of the definition of the word God. One may ask, what is the meaning of the thesis that God is everything, which was proposed by Vedanta? Or other questions may arise, like, what is Christian Trinity? What is Brahman? Are there planetary gods, demiurges? How should I understand the assertion that Jesus, Babaji, Satya Sai Baba, each of them is also God. How can I reconcile the Vedantic thesis that Brahman is absolutely everything with Krishna's assertion that there is a yet higher level of the divine consciousness, Ishvara, or God the Father? Let us make it perfectly clear. First of all, we should not regard various pagan deities, since they have nothing to do with the ideology of a serious seeker of God. Those deities are what people were fantasizing about before they received the knowledge about one universal God. There was plenty of those pseudo-religious fairy tales in ancient Greece, Rome, India, Arabian countries, and Russia. Let us leave those characters to folklorists' studies and continue with a serious scientific approach based on experimental study of truth and information provided directly by God. So, what is the Absolute? This word means absolutely everything that exists in the universe. And what does exist in the multidimensional universe? First of all, it is the Creator himself. Material, constituent of the creation and consciousnesses of all levels, other than that of the Creator, are just a small part of the Absolute. Furthermore, the Creator pervades the whole creation with himself. The creation, consisting of various manifestations in various eons, is like a multidimensional layered pie, in which the primary layer dominates the rest. At the same time, this pie is one whole. There exists only all, one whole multidimensional all. This is not only one of the most important themes for meditation, but also an undoubted truth that reflects the Absolute. But we, people, are we integral parts of the Absolute? The answer is yes and no. On one hand, we are like blood cells in the multidimensional body of the Absolute. We are negligibly small compared to it, incapable of separate existence, and dependent on it in everything, although having a certain freedom of movement within its body. But on the other hand, from the standpoint of these cells, as opposed to the body of the Absolute as macroorganism, we, as souls, are undoubtedly separate from him. Moreover, we possess a significant amount of free will, which the Creator granted to us. The point is that we, having come into existence as separate souls, have to return to the state of non-separateness, or non-duality, with God in his basic eon. The thesis that we are originally identical to the Creator, and even that we do not have any free will at all, proposed by some, can serve only as a theme for meditation, though quite an effective one that calls upon us to merge with him. In reality, the free will is the mechanism of natural sorting of people by the ethical criterion. Do we observe the rules of life suggested by God? Do we aspire to merge with him in love? How our destinies form depends on decisions we make in this respect. The level of our philosophic and religious knowledge, and the intensity of our efforts on transforming ourselves in accordance with the will of God, determine our moving from one eon to another in particular. As it should be clear from everything said above, It depends not on our actions, but on our prevailing emotional status, whether we accustomed ourselves to living in coarse or subtle emotional states. If we have accustomed ourselves to living in the heavy and coarse states of malice and hatred, we are going to share the diabolic abode with those who feel the same way. But if we have lived in the subtle and tender states of love, we naturally get into the harmony and purity of paradise. If we have lived a dull life without falling into particularly coarse emotional states, but without pronounced subtlety of the consciousness, after the death of the body we find ourselves in the grey eons of the creation. But it is not even paradise that should be our goal. It should be the abode of God the Father. He tells us about that all the time. In order to settle in it, one must possess not only subtlety of the consciousness, but also wisdom. One can gain it through increasing the level of one's erudition, intellectual work, active service to other people with good deeds, and persistent aspiration for cognition of God. The Holy Spirit is an aggregate of divine individualities coming out of the abode of the Creator. The cosmic function of the Holy Spirit is to supervise the evolution of all souls of lower levels of development. It is the Holy Spirit who organizes and supervises our destinies. He does it himself, directly, or by calling to assistance numerous spirits that possess various qualities, either paradisiacal or diabolic. When we perceive the waves of bliss coming from somewhere in response to our righteous thoughts or actions, this is the Holy Spirit manifesting himself. In such instances, people say that he is granting us his blessing. Special meditative techniques allow one to get into frequent blissful contacts with the Holy Spirit quite easily. In order to clarify the meaning of the word Brahman, we need to say a few words about the ancient Indian philosophical system of knowledge called Vedanta. This is important for us since Sathya Sai Baba, the avatar of modern age, addressing Hindus educated within the Vedanta tradition, often uses the terminology of this particular philosophic school. The Vedanta philosophy originated in India even before Krishna and was based on the pagan teachings of the 4 Vedas. At that time, Indian people did not know about the existence of Ishvara, God the Father, i.e. the Creator who dwells in his abode. This was the reason why Brahman was considered by the Vedanta philosophy as a supreme Godhead and even as the Absolute. It was Krishna who told people of India about God the Father. Later, God declared the same truth through Jesus Christ and Muhammad to the people of Israel and of all modern Christian and Islamic worlds. But people of both India and the Christian world failed to preserve this knowledge about God the Father, which exceeded their ability to comprehend. They almost completely forgot about his existence, having switched their attention to ancient fairy tale characters in India, or to some imaginary deified characters in mass Christian sects. There is the last question out of those listed in the beginning of this chapter that we have not answered yet, namely, what is the Trinity? There exists God the Father, the supreme primordial consciousness, who dwells in the subtlest eon of the multidimensional universe, on the other side of the mirror, relatively to the multidimensional aggregate of the creation. He is the highest goal for all people. His primary manifestation, his representative, an active manager and supervisor of all life on any populated planet, is the Holy Spirit. Sometimes, God the Father manifests himself by incarnating in a human body. Those embodied parts are people who attained the Creator in the past. In different languages, they are called messiahs, avatars, Christs, etc. In other words, the Trinity is the Creator, the Holy Spirit, and a Christ. In Bhagavad Gita's terms, it is Ishvara, Brahman, and an avatar. But as Jesus himself explains, the term Son is not at all felicitous in this context, since everyone should learn to see God as their father-mother and themselves as his son or his daughter.